Welcome. I love the fact that it takes a while to get everybody pulled together. The energy in that room is fantastic, especially compared to a few years ago. So that's an encouraging sign right there. I do want to say thank you to our sponsors. We've got a handful of sponsors that help make this event possible for us. Starting with Cohen Financial, they've become critical to us in helping us find the credit needed to get some deals done this year. We've appreciated them. Custer, who's provided us with the stage set. And First American Title, obviously getting deals closed is what they appreciate as well. And Miller Johnson, we've been working with them for years and appreciate their partnership. So thank you to our sponsors. I just ask that we acknowledge them for helping us make this possible. This is a fun time for me. I love this event. This room is made up of partners, of clients, friends from the media. We've got students. We even have some competitors in the room, service providers from throughout the industry. I appreciate getting together with all of you. What this room means to me is it represents trust. I want to thank you for entrusting us with the information that we're providing, and it's our commitment to you that we will work to earn that trust time and time again. So thank you. And finally, I'd like to thank GVSU and Seidman College of Business. This has been a great partnership. I think we're 8 years now. And we've got a great partner who's up to some great things. And Dean, if you would maybe just take a moment and share some of the things you're working on, I'd appreciate it. Dean Williams, thank you.
Thanks, Derek. And good morning and welcome. I bring you greetings and a collective Happy New Year from President Haas, Provost Davis, and the faculty, staff, and students at Grand Valley State University. We really appreciate your carving time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning and to share in this experience. We really appreciate our partners, first of all, Colliers, 8 years now. We really appreciate working with Derek and his team. And Colliers International, one of the third largest commercial real estate services firm in the country. And we all know how important real estate is. And in fact, if President Haas were standing here, he'd have a good story for you. But I'm not going to tell you a story. But I will remind you of a real estate story. Happened some 50 years ago out in Allendale. Well, that's a real estate story that tells you what a little real estate, a little passion, a little compassion, vision, and support and nurturing of a community can do. And after 50 years of existence, I think it's appropriate, and this is a great opportunity for me on behalf of Grand Valley to thank all of you for the support that you provided us over these 50 years. We're really proud that we're a part of this community. And it's always been about this community, never about Grand Valley State University per se. And so that real estate story is the history of Grand Valley State University, but it's also a big part of the legacy of Bill Seidman. Because you guys know this story better than I do, quite frankly. But Bill and a group of business leaders here decided that we needed Grand Valley State University in this community. And I'm proud to report to you that there's another little real estate adventure going on right downtown here in Grand Rapids. We are making great progress in the design and fundraising phase of this constructing of a new L. William Seidman Center for the Seidman College of Business. It's going to be located right downtown here. And I'd like to thank all of you for the support you've provided, even in these tough economic times, to help us to create the resources we need to construct that building. It obviously does a lot for Grand Valley State University's Seidman College of Business. It does a lot for this community. And it's also a fitting tribute to one of our fallen heroes, Bill Seidman. So I want to thank all of you for that. And, please, and also thank you for indulging me that minute or two. I would remind you that generally during this time of the year, I would submit a publication called the Seidman update. And there was one out on the table, but that's not the most recent version. I would encourage you to be on the lookout, because in the next couple of months, we will be sending you a special 50th anniversary edition. And it's going to be a great one, so be on the lookout for that. You will find in your seats this publication, the Seidman Business Review, that focuses on West Michigan businesses. We take very seriously our responsibility to be on top of what's happening here in this community and to report to you and to provide for you whatever we can of our expertise, and you'll see that in this publication. And so at this point, I'd like to move on with the program by introducing the editor of the Seidman Business Review, an outstanding economic forecaster, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Harry Singh.
Thank you, James. Good morning.
Morning.
Can everyone hear me? All right. So last year, during this month, in this place, we stood and said, there is a good morning coming our way. We could see at the end of the horizon some glimmer of light. But this year, in 2011, it's good morning indeed, because the sun is rising again. So the numbers will bear it out. But before we do that, we got to go to our typical convention of holding our feet to the fire and making sure that what we said was what actually happened, or see the slippage in the forecast. So last year we predicted that for 2010, the real output, the gross domestic product, will grow between 2 to 3%. And as you can see, the fluctuation in the quarters, we started with a big bang, but somewhere towards the summer, things started going softer. We hit a soft patch, partly because of all the stuff going on in Europe. And the projection for the fourth quarter is about 2.3%. Once the history books are written, these preliminary numbers are revised, and the final numbers come in, the average growth for 2010 might be something like 2.6%, smack in the middle of what we said. I wish we were wrong. I wish we didn't hit the soft patch in the summer and it actually accelerated in the fall, but that did not happen. So it did fall right there in between. In terms of our regional forecasts, we said that actual employment in West Michigan would grow between 0.3 to 0.4. We said it would grow around 0.5%. And if you look at the actual numbers from November to November, the actual growth has been somewhere between 0.3 to 0.4%. So again, the numbers are fairly close to the actual forecast we made in terms of 0.5%. As you digest all these forecasting numbers, there's a teaching moment here. Typically, the regression models, there are only two ways to forecast. One way is to do it by regression, statistical forecast. The other way is to do it by survey data, ask experts. The regression models tend to have a longer drag in the sense that they're not able to pick up the turning points very well. And last year we had a turning point. The subjective models, the ones which are with survey data, tend to be subject to a certain amount of exaggeration. So in pessimistic times, we tend to get a little bit more pessimistic. And during good times, we tend to get some euphoria. So you can see there's a huge literature on how the stock market overreacts to things. Overreacts during bad times and also overreacts during good times. So there's good and bad in both these kinds of forecasts. But the interesting thing is that these are not my forecasts, at least the regional employment forecast. This is what the CEOs are saying. And they seem to be right on the ball in terms of what they've been saying for the last 2 years. So at least the subjective forecasts tend to be more accurate for the region compared to the statistical forecast done by models. Now we're going to throw a lot of data at you today. Tons of slides coming up in terms of data. And you're going to get OD'd with data. So one number I always look at when you're looking at the national economy is the index of leading indicators, because it's a weighted index of 10 factors. 10 factors which are known to lead the business cycle. So they always happen about 6 months before the actual things happen. And the leading economic index has been going up for the last 5 months. You can see that the improvement in the LEI is because the financial indicators are getting better. Consumer expectations are rising. Sometimes they fall a bit, but if you look at the moving average, the long-term trend, they're rising. Manufacturing has stabilized and is starting to grow again. And more importantly, the early labor market indicators, something like initial unemployment claims, are dropping. Now again, there's a lot of noise in initial unemployment claims, but if you look at the moving average, the 5-week moving average, it has been dropping consistently. That means the labor market is healing very significantly. So what will fuel growth at the national level in 2011? Exports have been surging, mostly to Asia because of the low dollar. The shopping season has been relatively good. Consumers are coming back into the market. Of course, we don't want the consumers to go on a binge, and go on their credit cards, but consumption expenditure is 70% of GDP. So the fact that consumers are feeling optimistic and they're spending again to some extent is good news. The big story in 2011 will be private investment, corporate investment, which will pick up. It has been waiting on the sidelines. 2011 is when they come in. The fiscal policies are going to be a drag. And the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates low, but the impact of the Federal Reserve policies is already done. So the impact of QE2 and stuff like that is fairly minimal. Looking at the employment prospects for the national economy, you can see that productivity numbers have been going up because corporations have been leery about hiring, so they've been using existing workers much more effectively. But now the productivity increases are maxed out. So temporary hiring has been going up, but now the permanent hiring is going to start taking place significantly. Again, when you look at the monthly numbers for employment, the amount of jobs created nationwide, it goes in a zigzag fashion. Sometimes it's below expectations, but by the end of the year, definitely we'll start getting a resurgence and a consistent pattern in terms of hiring, so that we'll start getting jobs of around 250,000 per month. We have a long way to go because almost 12 million Americans got unemployed during the Great Recession. One interesting question which economists are asking right now is, what is the natural rate of unemployment under this new normal that we have? In other words, how much can we push unemployment down without accelerating inflation? In the late 1990s, the unemployment rate had come down to around 4.5% and did not generate inflation. But the new normal, the new bottom for the unemployment, is probably going to be higher than that. Somewhere around 6% would be an optimistic number, somewhere around 7% would be a pessimistic number. And that's because many people have been unemployed for a long time, and their skills have become relatively obsolete. So some of them will have a much harder time trying to find employment and try to lower that unemployment rate. Coming back to West Michigan, the 4 counties which we're talking about, Kent, Ottawa, Muskegon, and Allegan counties, our sample is based on 211 respondents, roughly a response rate of around 22%. And all indicators in our survey point to the fact that we are having a significant turnaround. Last year, we consolidated, we bottomed out, and we started growing again. But the growth last year was not that significant. This year, we're going to have much stronger growth. You can see that in manufacturing, and the growth sectors are going to be health sector, education, professional services, and hopefully more innovation in alternative energy projects and things like that. Now, this graph shows the whole story of West Michigan for the last 16 years. We've been doing this for 16 years. So in the good times, in the 1990s, the confidence level was around 85% or so. In 2001, with the recession, it dipped down and went to around 65% or so. And we hadn't recovered from the recession of 2001 when we were hit with the recession of 2007. And at that time then, the numbers actually came down below the 50% benchmark. So for the last 2 years, 2007, 2008, the confidence level was around 49%. So for the first time now, as you see this recovery bouncing back, the number right now is around 55% and is projected to grow to almost 60%. So we are gaining that lost ground as we speak in terms of the recovery. But you can see that's quite far away from the good old days of the mid-1990s and late 1990s, when it was around 85%. In terms of employment, I think that's a remarkable story in terms of West Michigan projections, that employment is expected to grow around 2%. The exact number they say is 2.3% when we take out the outliers. You can see that numbers are clustered around the 2% zone down here, but there's a significant amount of persons, 40 respondents, who are going to employ more than 3% growth. So in good times, we used to have employment growing at around 2%. So this is relatively a fast rate of growth in terms of employment for 2011. If we dig deeper into the numbers, try to find out why they are so optimistic about employment, last year, 36% were saying that they're going to hire. This year, that number has almost doubled. It's 60%. 60% are saying that they're going to hire in 2011. And again, out of the 60%, more than 2/3 are saying that they're going to hire permanent workers. So before this, they were actually doing much more capital-intensive stuff, using much more machinery, trying to use the existing workers. Now, for the first time, they're going to increase their labor ratio. And the good news is that a majority of that hiring is going to be permanent workers. So sales, overall sales, in good times, they are around 5%. These are nominal sales, so they include increases in output, but also increases in prices. Could be either one of those. They're clustered around the 2%, 3% zone, but there's still a significant amount, 44 respondents, who project sales growth of more than 3%. Overall, the average will be 2.5%, roughly about half the growth rate of the good times when we used to have around 5% in the late 1990s. The interesting thing about West Michigan is that even during bad times, in the last 2 years, exports have been growing at a significant rate. So last year, exports were growing at 8%. This year, exports are projected to grow at 9%. And again, that's the low value of the dollar and the resurgence of exports to Asia. And you can see that there are some guys here who are really exploding in terms of their exports numbers. This is one of the things we have to do more and more, try to become much more global in character. At least the small businesses, small manufacturing businesses, try to look for export opportunities aggressively all over the world. Now, when you look at the shift in sentiments, the shift in the psychological mood, it's best expressed by this pie chart. The blue and the red part of the pie chart is what I call perennial optimists. These are guys, even last year or the year before, they were thinking that the good times will come back within 1 year. By good times, we mean the kind of times we had in the late 1990s, right? The green side is the one who are pragmatists. They're somewhere in the middle. And last year, 36% were saying that we're going to have the recovery and go back to good times within 2 years. Now that number has moved from 36% to 42%. So that's the shift in sentiment right there. The purple part of the chart are the pessimists. These are the guys who are saying that the recovery will be after 2 years. Maybe they're pessimists, maybe they're thinking about a new normal so that we won't return to the good times like the late 1990s. But this number has come down from 45% to 37%. So you can see the larger part of the green area, the pragmatic optimists are increasing, and the pessimists, the purple area, is decreasing over time. So this corroborates the kind of expectations we have about employment and sales and exports. So the prospects for West Michigan, to summarize, our employment will grow around 2%. That translates to about 10,300 jobs, to be specific. Expected sales growth is around 2.5% to 3%. Exports are almost 10%. And these are the sectors which are going to expand: health-related services, specialized services, education. For Michigan, the important thing is to try to position ourselves for the expanding industries of the future. And one of the industries, obviously, that in the whole century is going to be alternative energy. Right now, it's a preoccupation with developed countries. 30, 40 years down the road, it's going to be a preoccupation with developing countries. So this whole idea of alternative energy innovation is not going to go away. It's going to accelerate. The need for this is going to accelerate as we go into the century. So we've got to position ourselves down there, make sure that our graduates from excellent universities like Grand Valley State University stay here. They don't go to a place like California. Now, the outlook for the national economy, the impact of monetary policy is going to be fairly minimal. Government tightening at the federal level. Also, state levels are trying to balance their books, so they're going to cut back quite significantly. So fiscal policy, when you add the local stuff, the state stuff, and the federal stuff, at best, it's neutral. It's probably going to be a drag in net terms. But growth is expected to pick up, and our projection for this year, next year we'll stand here and see whether we realize that projection or not. So we are bumping up our projection for GDP growth from 3 to 4%. So last year it was 2 to 3%. Now it's a 1% increase in terms of what we had last year. And employment will improve significantly. If you like to follow politics more than economics, like I do, most of the political pundits say that if the unemployment comes down to around 7% by the time when the presidential election takes place in November 2012, then the current president, President Obama, will have an easy time trying to get second term. If the unemployment rate is around 8%, 8.5%, then typically the incumbents have a more difficult time getting a second term. So that's kind of a tough benchmark in terms of what we want to do with unemployment in the next 2 years. Let me close with a caveat, a very strong caveat, something I believe in very strongly. I don't call it the elephant in the room. I call it the gorilla in the room because it's on our backs and it's growling. Now, the issue is this. This is the $64,000 question, whether this century is going to be the American century or not. And that is that we have to balance the books in the long run. We have to have some kind of fiscal discipline in terms of reducing the large amount of federal budget deficits. If you look at the CBO projections, it's $1 trillion per year till the eye can see, right? That's a scary sight. The other scary part is that we got to make investments in capital in terms of R&D, basic R&D. Corporations don't do basic R&D. Basic R&D has to be done by the federal government. The kind of R&D which wins Nobel Prizes, right? So basic R&D, education and training, infrastructure, alternative technologies for energy, all this stuff we have to do while we are trying to balance the budget in the long run. That's why the gorilla on our backs is growling, right? It's a tough call. The optimistic scenario about this is that we have a grand compromise. And we'll see what President Obama says in his State of the Union address. But the grand compromise would be that we simplify the tax system, we lower the tax rates, we broaden the base. So once you do these kinds of things, you actually increase the tax revenue. So it's actually tax increases because you take away all the stupid deductions which make your form look much longer. You know, you have to do all this complicated kind of stuff. So basically your income tax can fit on a postcard kind of thing. And then if the Republicans swallow that, right, the Democrats have to swallow this whole idea of trying to bring entitlements under control. I submit to you, I know I'm talking mostly to a Republican crowd, I submit to you that both the Republicans and the Democrats will have to swallow stuff they don't like if you want to see a grand compromise. The negative scenario, and this is what keeps me up in the night sometimes, is the fact that we start playing shenanigans with this whole idea of raising the budget ceiling. And it jitters the market. The markets do a swoon. And then basically there's a run on the dollar. Now that American solvency is still very good. But if you don't balance the books in the long run, we are going that way. We are going the way of Greece or Spain. So we've got to stop that, right? And we want to kind of make the bond markets, the long-term bond markets, comfortable so that they have credible expectations about our long-term solvency. The middle-of-the-road scenario, and probably the one with the highest probability, hopefully, not hopefully, but unfortunately, is that we muddle through. In other words, we kick the can down the road, do a little bit of investment, and we continue this kind of progressive decline in terms of our economic foundations, which we need to make stronger. So this is the $64,000 question of this century, how we answer this call to our destiny, how we shape our destiny. So I think it's a good idea to put some bets on which kind of scenario we're going to have. But something to think about. And having said that, I'll close. Thank you very much. Now Ross, the chief economist of Colliers, will give us an outlook about the national real estate industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Yes. Wow, big group. Good to see you all. It's always nice to wake up, grab a newspaper, and see a headline that supports your presentation. I'm not sure if people have seen today's Wall Street Journal, but I'll read it to you here. U.S. factories buck decline. Last year, manufacturing jobs were up 136,000, 1.3%, which is the first increase since 1989. And I think it certainly fits in with what I'm going to say today. And I appreciate that Dr. Singh has covered the economy. And I'm going to try not to spend too much on the same material, but I do need to touch on a few things he's already said, just so the pieces all fit together. The good news is, and maybe people don't think so, but I think the good news is we're on the same page. I don't think I could agree with him more. I think the economic outlook is looking especially good. And I think the biggest challenge I have today is to curb my enthusiasm. Now, it may be because the last couple of years have been really tough for people like me to stand up in front of these large audiences and try to sound enthusiastic when things are falling apart. But I really do think that for owners and operators of commercial real estate, 2011 might be the absolute perfect year. And so let me explain why I say that. We're obviously a capital-intensive business. So interest rates and the cost of debt is critical to us. And I think interest rates are going to stay generally very low throughout 2011. At the same time, I think the economy is going to surprise on the upside. So when I see Dr. Singh's projections of 3 to 4%, absolutely. And if I had to say 3 or 4, I'm going to go with 4. Employment, that's a big problem, but I'll say more about that in a moment. But I think that that's not necessarily a key ingredient certainly for industrial, but I think the commercial real estate world is going to really move this year, and it's going to move quite quickly. So anyway, with that introduction, let me jump right in. And I've obviously started on a pretty positive note, but we do still have much to worry about, and I don't have time to run through each and every one of these things. But if you were to ask me, what keeps me awake at night, this would be it. And there are some real big ones. China, I'm obsessed. I'll come clean. I'm obsessed with China, and I have been for some time. I think it is absolutely the #1 macroeconomic trend, macro driver, call it what you like, in the world by far. China dictates everything. And so you have to watch China. I think China will manage things, but in Chinese inflation, as you may know, is now hitting 5%. And if they really do clamp down, that's a could be a big drag for the global economy and have an effect here in the U.S. And as I said, I won't run through all those things, but these are real big issues that I think we all should be aware of. Okay, I do have to talk about employment. It is critical for filling up office buildings, as an example. And it's been a pretty tough time. You can see here in the chart that we've lost a lot of jobs, and then over the last year, we've kind of bounced around the last few months of last year. We're reasonably good. December was absolutely disappointing. I was expecting far more jobs than I think the 103,000 that we created. I do want to just put things in perspective. I really like this slide because without comparing, it's really difficult to really understand what's going on. 1981-83 was a terrible recession. It's the year I graduated from high school. I know I don't look that old. Anyway, it was a tough recession, and there were certainly jobs lost. But look how this recession compares with the last significant recession. Significantly more jobs were lost this time around. This is a very big hole. To think that 27, 29 months after the beginning of the recession, the U.S. was back to, in effect, full employment, or at least back to employment levels where they were. Here we are, 37 months, and we are certainly off the bottom, but there are a lot of jobs still missing. And I think that is probably the one thing that I have to worry about most of all. On the plus side, private sector employment, we've heard about it. And I get asked, one of the things you're going to see is that we're putting out some pretty good office numbers. And so I get phone calls and they'll say, Ross, your office numbers seem pretty good. The economy's still not great. We're not producing jobs. And my standard answer has really been, well, look at private sector employment. Private sector employment's doing okay. 12 consecutive months, numbers are about 1.2%. What's really interesting is professional and business services up 2.2%. So the sectors, the professions, the jobs that typically fill up office buildings growing at 2.2%. I can live with 2.2%. That's a reasonably good number. So I think that's important to keep in mind. The unemployment rate, I wish I could share Dr. Singh's enthusiasm, and I can't see where he's sitting. I'd love to be at 7% by November 2012. I think we saw a big drop last month, but it's really because people are leaving the workforce. I just can't see how the unemployment rate will be below 9% by the end of this year. And maybe, next year we'll drift below 9, but to get down to 7 would be a real stretch. But I think what's interesting here is even college graduates are having a relatively tough time. The unemployment rate has more than doubled there. But the question, and this is something that I really just sort of come to grasp with recently, and the question is, why aren't we seeing more jobs created? I follow the big Fortune 500 companies, and it doesn't matter whether it's Caterpillar or Ford or IBM, they're all hiring. There are no mass layoffs. I mean, I haven't got that slide with me today, but you can track, layoffs, and layoffs are way down. I mean, really down. And so I hear about all these jobs being created, but they're not being reflected in the employment numbers. And I have come to the conclusion, the answer is right here. Small businesses just haven't been hiring. And I suspect in this audience, there are a lot of small businesses, and you're saying, well, yeah. And again, I won't run through all the bullets. Hopefully you can read through them as I'm speaking. But it's critical. It's critical. And one of the reasons, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but one of the reasons I'm optimistic for the economy and for commercial real estate is I genuinely believe the tide has turned, and that small businesses, and it was great to see Dr. Singh's slides looking at businesses locally here to see how optimistic they are in terms of hiring. And I think I think two things have happened. One, the economic recovery is old enough and robust enough that there's now a degree of confidence. Certainly wasn't there a year ago. But I think more importantly, and it's one of my slides, and I'll show you in a moment, but the important thing is that credit, and it's critical, if you look at my bullet points there, is now available. As a matter of fact, one of the government stats, and I'll get to it in a moment, we had an increase, the first increase in 2.5 years. So I think that is absolutely critical. So if you go away with one thing, go away with this. And this second chart just sort of gives you an idea of where the small business sentiment index, if I can use that, has been. And it's off the bottom, but we're back where we were. So small businesses, I think it's absolutely critical. Just a few more things on employment. I think people are sort of interested on, which cities are producing jobs. The market leader the leader across the country for some time now has been Austin. Austin has been firing on all cylinders. It's just a great story in Austin. And these are the most recent numbers, 2 to 2.5%. So when I saw Dr. Singh's forecast for 2011 and West Michigan could see 2% growth, that would put you up near Austin. So that's fantastic. So that's terrific news. The other top 10 here I think are fairly obvious. Washington, D.C., I hate to say it, but a lot of jobs in Washington. I think we all know about that. But really at the moment it's Texas and it's Washington. With a few weird ones. The weird one that I've been watching for a while is Minneapolis. And I can't truly explain why we're seeing good job growth in Minneapolis. And Phoenix. Who would have thought Phoenix? And this isn't just a one-off. Phoenix has been powering along for a while. And then we have the bottom 10 and places like Reno and Vegas. I was in Vegas recently speaking. And it's tough. There's real no sign of a turnaround there. Okay. Looking forward, I thought I would just throw this slide in there. These are forecasts put out by Moody's Economy.com, and it's just a 5-year average. And I think what you should take away from this slide is that for the next 5 years, well, two things you should take away. One is that the growth rates really aren't that good. You have to appreciate that there are some structural changes going on in the U.S., and that the growth rates that we had in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s are not coming back. And it is largely structural. So you'll see even the leaders here, you've got Houston, Dallas, 2.5%, but you've got a lot of cities down at 1.5%. And I think that's a reality we all need to face. Demographics is a big headwind. So we're just not going to see a lot of office buildings get filled up, as an example, because of that. The other point I would make here is that going forward, it is going to be the Texas, the Floridas, the Sun Belt. Sun Belt is where a lot of the jobs are going to be. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, so I'm very happy to see Seattle and Portland in there as well. But really, it's the Sun Belt. Despite what we hear about places like Florida, in terms of growth for the next 5 years, the action is in where the sun is. I like this because it's, the consumer confidence put up by the conference board. I think this great barometer. It gives you an idea where the economy is, what people are feeling and thinking. And I think here, unfortunately, the good news is we're off the bottom. The bad news is we're a long way from where we should be. 90 is the number that I look at. We're still stuck in the 50s. ISM, my absolute favorite indicator for industrial. If I want to know where industrial is going, this is the one that I look at. And there's a pretty good story here. Actually, there's a great story here. And I'll come clean and tell you right now, for 2011, my money is on industrial. Industrial, and I'm on a limb here because you'll see my numbers don't support my enthusiasm yet. But I think that industrial is where it's at. It's just, the numbers are great. The overall reading is now 57. Anything over 50 is great. We were up at 60, but I'm not worried about that. But what's encouraging is they have a number of sub-indices, so new orders, production, they're all up at 60. Industrial is absolutely off the scales, and I go back to the Wall Street Journal to back my argument up. Exports, I won't cover that again because Dr. Singh did, but it's a fantastic story. Quick thing, who here realizes that the US is the third largest merchandise exporter in the world? My impression is that everything's made in China. And China actually did now overtake Germany. So there was a switch, but the US is a huge exporter. So, don't think that the US doesn't make things. It makes a lot of stuff. And with the dollar where it is, and the investment and the efficiencies that are going on, the US is going to be, once again, become a very, very large manufacturer and exporter. So I'm incredibly optimistic on this. On exports. Inflation. I have to talk about inflation because it has a huge impact on every one of us in the room. The bond market is dictated by inflation. The bond market dictates borrowing rates. And I think everybody in this room is thinking, okay, what's going to happen with interest rates? Short-term rates is given. They're staying at 0 for the rest of this year and I think could well into 2012. But what about long-term rates? 10-year Treasury, big jump recently. But I look at this and I say, pretty hard for 10-year rates to go higher when you have core rates that are 0.6%. Now, this number is almost certainly going to go up. We've seen, rising gas prices, recently. Food prices are going up. But it's just, we're talking about 50, 60-year lows in terms of inflation. As a matter of fact, up until really the last 6-8 weeks, I've been more concerned about deflation than I have been in inflation. But this is a hugely important issue in terms of inflation. And if you had to, if I had to say which way I'm more concerned still on the deflation side than I am on the inflation side. Mind you, $92 a barrel oil is starting to scare me a little bit. In the last 4 decades, every run-up in the price of oil has produced a recession. But I think we got a ways to go here. So this is just a forecast put out by IHS Global. I just wanted to show you the forecast that we're working with over the next 3-4 quarters. So 3-4%. As I said, we're on the same page as Dr. Singh. Now, before I talk about real estate in more depth, I just want to cover 2 things very quickly. So bear with me. 1 is credit, and then 2 is profits. I've been obsessed by credit for the last probably 2 years. And so I've been following this very carefully. Now, there's a lot of information on this chart, and I appreciate for the people at the back, it's hard to read. But let me just say just 3 things very quickly. 1 is, actually I'll start with the red line. So the red line is cash assets that the banks have on their balance sheets. What's important there is, as you probably all know, the Fed has been flooding the system with cash. Well, guess where all the cash is ending up? Not in your pockets, it's ending up on bank balance sheets. And there was a reason for doing that. It makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot there. And what it means, though, is that the banking system is in much better shape and they're able to lend. Remember, lending is critical. The second thing I'll just get you to look or highlight is the blue line. And I made a reference to this before. So this is commercial leases and loans. Loans. You can't see on this slide, and I apologize. But if you could look very, 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 very closely at the right-hand side, that blue line moved up. That's November. I think it's November's numbers. It moved up. Not by a lot, but it went up. That's after like 27 quarters of it going down. So I know that 1 month doesn't make a trend, but to me, that's big news, and I'm going to be watching that. So I do believe that the banks are starting to lend. The other thing that's interesting is the green or yellow line, depends whether you're, no, it's green, is revolving credit. So when you see revolving credit, think credit cards. So I've been watching this. This is just the same data. I've just kind of blown it up a little bit. But look at this. I mean, what you don't see is on the left-hand side, this is a trend that goes back 3 or 4 decades. Month after month after month, quarter after quarter, more and more credit is in the system. Well, it's coming out, and that's been a very, very, very big headwind. And the latest data shows a further contraction. So that's a big number. That's a lot of credit that's being taken out of the system. So when I think about retail, especially, and the ability of the consumer to spend, I think of this one. So this is another one that I watch. So to end on an exceptionally positive note before I get into the real estate stuff is corporate profits. So again, if people ask me, Ross, why are you so optimistic about real estate? I'll tell them profits. Look at these numbers. Now, we are a smidge off the highs that we saw a couple of years ago. Now, mind you, we don't have the Q4 numbers. I think the Q4 numbers were going to be an all-time record. American corporations are making profits like never before. Profits have to go somewhere. Now, the first place they'll probably go is new capital investment, plant machinery. I buy that. But it will lead to new jobs. And certainly, if you're sitting there saying, well, do I hire or do I not hire? If you've got huge profits, you're certainly more likely to say, well, you know what? Maybe we will hire these 3 guys, see how it works out. So profits lead to jobs. So I'm very, very confident of that. Okay, leasing markets. I'm not going to run through all these bullets here. You can read them as I speak. But there are some very interesting dynamics going on within the leasing markets. As I said, I do need to temper my enthusiasm because, unfortunately, we are a lagging indicator, and all I can do really is stand up here and promise you that it will be better tomorrow. But I think all of the ingredients are there. There are absolutely headwinds, and if I can just digress a few, just for a second, one of the things that does concern me is going back to profits. You're an American corporation, and you've got shareholders, and your profits have been good. Well, as you all know, certainly as a public company, you've got to grow profits. Well, you've got rising input costs, right? Inflation has been rising. How do you maintain those profits? You've obviously got to keep your wage costs down. But I do worry, because real estate is obviously a very large expense for most corporations, whether they are going to start really squeezing real estate. So that's kind of one thing that's sitting in the back of my mind saying, you know what, maybe things won't be quite as great because I think they've got to keep those profits up whether real estate is going to get squeezed. And I made mention here of more efficient use that's a reference to square feet per worker. The lease accounting changes, the FASB 13, I won't get into it today, but I don't think it's an issue, and certainly afterwards, if you're interested in the subject, I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, here's a lot of data for you, and I apologize, but I really wanted to show you the cycle and where we are. If you just shift your eyes to the right of the slide, you can see the most recent numbers. So that's about 15 million square feet of absorption in the 4th quarter. That's a great number. My rule of thumb is for the country, if we have 20 million square feet per quarter, I can live with that all day. That's a pretty good number. So to be at 15 at this stage is a great number. Now, I have to point out that there's a couple cities or a couple markets, Manhattan and Washington, account for more than a third. So the numbers are being skewed by those 2 markets. You get beyond those markets, and it would be a stretch to say things are great. Having said that, Denver had a great quarter. Dallas had a really good quarter. I'm hearing nothing but great things out of Dallas. Seattle had a good quarter. Boston. So it is not just Washington and New York, but they are a big part of it. So I am encouraged. So that's on the demand side. On the supply side, nothing. I mean, 3 million square feet. You can see that you go back. A few years, we were looking at 25 to 30 million per quarter. We're now at 3 million, so 1/10. If I look forward, we're now down to 20 million square feet under construction. So at the end of the year, 20 million square feet. 2 years ago, we were at 120 million. So, you know, new construction has always been the enemy of, I think, real estate investors, and it's pretty well going to zero. So I'm very encouraged with that. The vacancy rate certainly way up there, still at 16%, but it is going to come down. I can see the vacancy rate coming down a full point during the year. What about rents? You got to be a little bit careful with this chart. These are market weighted, so obviously the bigger markets have a bigger impact. And so if you look at downtown CBD rents, you can see an increase on the right there. That's really due to rents. Rents are increasing in New York quite dramatically. The second thing is second market, Washington. Washington, the rents were up almost $3 in the last quarter. And San Francisco. Those are big markets, and they do affect the national average. I think a better barometer is actually the suburban, and you can see on the right there that rents are still drifting lower. I don't see a turnaround in rents. But I just wanted to point out one other thing before I move on to industrial. You know, obviously real estate's always been local, but I'm seeing an interesting trend emerge, and that is that the market is becoming very stratified, and that the differences between some submarkets are quite dramatic. So let me give you a couple examples. So Boston, which is my sort of second home, and I appreciate for many of you these markets won't mean anything to you, but Back Bay is very close to the CBD. So at the moment, the Back Bay vacancy rate, 8.7%. You can walk to the CBD. The vacancy rate there is 19.6%. I mean, that's a dramatic difference. In the suburbs of Boston, what we call the I-28, the 128 and the 495 corridors, 495 is sitting with a vacancy rate of in excess of 30%. Certain 128 markets, low teens. In Washington, here's another example for you. Northern Virginia, in Northern Virginia, Arlington, 6%, Dulles, 16%. In LA, Santa Monica, 9.9%, Culver City, 30%. And for those of you who know LA, it's not that far. So what I'm saying is I think in 2011, we do need to stop generalizing and say, you know what, yeah, it's a generally sluggish market, but there are pockets that are doing very well. Okay, let's move on to industrial. So as I said, I've come clean on industrial, and if you look at this slide, certainly the absorption doesn't reflect maybe my enthusiasm, but it's coming. And I apologize, we wanted to have the Q4 numbers on this slide for today, but we got a couple markets that just aren't adding up. So I have not included the Q4 numbers here. But all indications are it's going to be a pretty good quarter. But same thing on supply here. I mean, there's virtually nothing. So that's the red bar. We're down at 3.5 million square feet. Nothing. Same thing on the construction side. So construction activity, again, 20 million. We're at 150 million end of 2000. So construction is more or less coming to an absolute standstill. Okay, warehouse rents, they are still going down, and I really thought that, I've been surprised actually that warehouse rents have come down quite as much. So we're looking at almost $1. We were a shade under $5.75 as a national average. We're now looking at $4.75. Something that does sort of, it has me thinking about industrial is, I've always thought that industrial, I can figure that out. It moves with GDP. Office, not the case, but you show me GDP, I'll show you industrial. Round numbers, but the economy shrank by about 4% during the recession. Occupied space for the industrial market only shrank by 2%. And that does concern me. Why wouldn't you see occupied space contract by a similar amount? So I do think there's some excess capacity in there. So when the economy does turn, I'm not convinced the industrial market is going to turn right away. It will turn. I absolutely believe that. But it is something to keep in mind. And I think it does reflect the fact that industrial rates continue to come down. Okay, shopping centers, retail. It's been, it's interesting. I do have the fourth quarter numbers in there. We've got 3 quarters of good, I should say good. We have 3 quarters of positive absorption. which after the last couple of years is saying something. So we are even seeing retail starting to turn. I think most of you saw the holiday sales numbers came in at around 3.5%, which I think is a reasonable number. We are not going back to 6%. I mean, if you go back to 2005, 2006, 2007, we were seeing annual retail sales 6.5%, 7.5%, 8%. We just can't get back there. Not with the savings rate where it is, not with wages, et cetera, debt levels. So I think that retail, it's going to be a slow turnaround, but retail is also turning around. And same sort of pattern on retail rents. They come down, they continue to come down, and I just can't see them doing anything this year. I think it's a blanket statement for retail, industrial, office. The rents are going nowhere this year. I mean, I'd be surprised. I don't think we're going to be negative, but we're not going to see any bounce, certainly in 2011. Which takes me to the investment market, and it's an amazing market. It is a market that is changing almost by the day. The year-end numbers are pretty well done, and we more than doubled 2009 levels. The number I've got so far is 130 billion. We were about 54 billion in 2009. So big uptick. A good number, there's about 40 markets that we track. I think 27 more than doubled. Sorry, up 200% rather. So there were some markets, Manhattan in particular, saw huge amounts of deals come to the market. And you know, the REITs were big buyers through most of 2010. They're still there, but everybody else is now jumping in. I'm going to touch on a couple different things: capital flows, distressed market, pricing, and sales volume. But I do want to just touch on delinquency rates. And you know, how many times have we all heard, is commercial real estate the next shoe to drop? And I think the media has finally, and I apologize to any members of the media here, but I think the media is starting to not ask that question, because I think it's now obvious to everybody that we are not the next shoe to drop, at least not in the way that I think many people were expecting. And one of the reasons, I think, is partly explained by this chart. So very quickly, I'll start with the good news and I'll work to the bad news. So insurance companies, that's the red line. You wonder why insurance companies are still lending today? Their delinquencies have hardly moved. And I think it just reflects basically superior underwriting skills. And so they're doing fine. Certainly the banks are up. I mean, they were sitting down under 1%. They're down at 4%. So there is some pain there. But it's CMBS. CMBS is the culprit. And my data goes through to the third quarter. I think the fourth quarter numbers are going to be out, and they'll be over 9%. But the problem with CMBS is it's very difficult to undo. So I think that's one of the reasons, and that's probably a good segue to my next chart, which is distressed sales. A year ago, it was all about the tsunami of distressed debt that was going to hit the market. And certainly it's been on the rise, but it has not been a tsunami. And I think one of the problems is, you know, every lender really opted for the extend and pretend business strategy or paradigm, if I can call it that, which I can't blame these people. They had the Fed's support, and pretty well every regulator was supporting them. But I think also CMBS is really hard to undo, and I think that goes a long way to explain why we haven't seen a dramatic increase in distressed sales. So for 2010, 18% of total sales were distressed sales. Just 18%. Now, by number of deals, I think it's around 23%. But, and it is increasing. I think for 2011, we could see that number up at 25%. Just based on conversations with our brokers really across the country, the banks are starting to finally get this stuff off their books. So we are going to see more. But what's interesting in this chart is that the total outstanding troubled and REO numbers, they're now going down. So we're seeing more workouts and debt resolved. Okay. The other question I get asked is, Ross, you know, how can the market bounce back when the public debt market is shut? You know, CMBS, I think in the absolute peak year, CMBS was, if it wasn't 50%, it was very close to 50% of all new debt into the market was public, was CMBS. How can the market come back without CMBS? Well, First of all, 2010 was 11.6 billion, which doesn't sound very much, but it was double 2009. But if I compare it to 2005, 2006, 2007, it's a drop in the bucket. But our forecast for some time is that for 2011, we're going to see $50 billion in CMBS this year. And again, that's not a big number, but it takes us back to at least 2001, 2002, 2003. Interestingly, I read just yesterday that it looks like we're going to see 13 billion just in the first quarter. So maybe 50 billion is not so crazy, and a few of our competitors are also not quite at 50. But what I'm trying to say here is that CMBS is coming back. People said never. I think it is, and it's now something that is at least an option for investors. Okay, investment sales, I think I already said it's up, overall more than double. And I realize you're looking at these charts and you're going, Ross, really? Is that number up? Yeah, it is. And I haven't got the fourth quarter numbers in here, but they are going to be huge. The December numbers alone I've got October and November, but I haven't got December. But we're going to see a big increase. Office had the biggest increase. Yes, office had the biggest increase. Retail, industrial, not so much. So it's revving up. So I can see this continuing, this upward trend continuing for some time. Same sort of pattern with industrial. Not so much for flex, certainly for warehouse and retail, same thing. You see strip, a big thing. One of the biggest changes in 2010, we finally saw the portfolio sales come back. Prior to certainly last summer, most of the deals were small, very few portfolios, but we're now starting to see some big deals come through. Cap rates, interesting here. We're seeing, these you got to be a little bit careful because this is weighted to the sales that occurred. So if you look at all the deals that occurred in New York as an example and Boston, they do skew the national average. But you're seeing a dramatic drop, specifically in particular CBD cap rates, down about 200 basis points. Now, mind you, office cap rates experienced the biggest increase, as you can see, and now they're coming back down quite sharply. What did I hear last week? Washington, D.C., 5% cap rates all day, and they're starting to at least hear about 4% cap rates. Washington is absolutely on fire. Industrial, we haven't seen the same sort of movement, but the general trend in industrial is also down, and same with retail. I'm almost done, but I just want to finish with this chart, and this chart is starting to get a little bit dated, but the question I was getting is, Ross, why would anybody buy commercial real estate? You know, the fundamentals are not awful. The fundamentals are not good. The outlook is mixed. So why would you do it? And I think what I was saying to people was it's just simply, you know what, we live in a relative world, and if my choice is buying 10-year treasuries at what were maybe you can't see it clearly there, but call it 2.5. Or do I buy prime New York, Washington, San Francisco office at 7.5? Well, I think that's an easy choice. And so it was just simply that spread. You're hearing deals where the big guys were borrowing at 4% and they're buying at 6.5. Why wouldn't you do that? It all makes sense. Now, obviously, things have changed. We've now got a 10-year treasury. I think it ended the day yesterday at 338, 340. So we have seen an increase. But I spoke to a number of our investment guys last week, and what they're hearing, and I have to believe them, is you'd have to see the 10-year treasury go to nearer 4% before the real estate guys are going to get worried. I mean, certainly we're good all the way to 375, but I suspect up to 4. So when we get to 4%, I think that will be a stumbling block. But I would counter that by saying, okay, 10-year treasury is on the way up, but is it on the way up because inflation is coming, or is it up because the world is just a better place and the economic prospects are better? I just don't think we are going to see inflation go up, I'll give you that, but not to the levels that we need to be concerned about. I think that 10-year treasury just reflects the fact that there's better things happening in the world, and that's a net good for for commercial real estate. So my last slide here is just simply best picks for 2011. 3 stars, Washington, D.C. It scored, we have a matrix, and it scores like number 1 or number 2 on every single one. Doesn't matter what you measure. The cities with 3 stars, kind of an odd bunch. Baltimore, I think Baltimore is just getting dragged along by Washington. Boston, I think, is obvious. New York, Miami. Miami's getting really tied in with Latin America. I see, lots going on there. Portland, they just have great fundamentals. Office jobs, I'm not thrilled about. Raleigh, education. And then the others all get 1 star. But I think Phoenix is like, when I put the numbers together, I'm like, really, Phoenix? But they just had great numbers. People are moving there, jobs are getting created. Houston, obvious, Austin. Charleston, the port, it's just doing great. They just finished a 1.2 million square foot build to suit. So in summary, I certainly feel a whole lot better this year than last year. I think it's going to surprise on the upside. I think that there's some good pent-up demand. Remember, all the good stuff that happened last, call it July, August, September, you're not going to see that in job growth until, March, April, May. It takes time to hire people, obviously. So I'm going to leave you on that positive note. I'm going to hand things back to Derek, who's going to take you through West Michigan.
Thank you, Ross. Thanks, Ross. So Ross is speaking very much at a national perspective. I'm going to try to take it down to a West Michigan perspective. I would say we should be one of the picks. I'm a little biased, but I'm going to look at this market locally from a supply-demand pricing kind of perspective. This chart shows office, retail, and industrial vacancy measurements, which is another term for measuring our supply. That red line, I think I've got the lines wrong, the yellow line, the office market, top line there. As one might expect to see, supply's gone up in that segment. As correlation to the times we're in, many office users are operating with less square footage. Many have just shut down completely. And they're currently running at about 25% vacant. That's 7 or 8 points higher than what I would call the norm if you look back 2005, 2006, 2007. The retail line is that red line. You can see a sharp uptick from 2008 to 2009. Retail obviously correlates much more directly with consumer confidence. So we can think back to the fall of 2008 and everybody was paralyzed. Obviously that has a ripple effect into the retail world. Retail is currently running at 11.5% in 2010. They've actually improved, if you see that, from 2009. So that's a good sign. Yet they're still a good 5 or 6 points above where they were in 05, 06, and 07. Industrial, this is, I think, our strong story from a vacancy standpoint, supply standpoint. If you look at that line, which is the blue line, you can see that up all the way back. It's never creeped over 10% as an overall vacancy measurement, and it's remained relatively healthy. In fact, 2009 to 2010, we saw improvement. We're currently at 9%. The peak vacancy year in the industrial market was all the way back in 2006. Why is this? I think you look at the industrial, the manufacturing segment, it's been restructuring for some time. Not just the last couple of years, not just this recent recession. That's the segment that's been restructuring for some time. You see that reflected here in supply. Just looking at demand, a simple way to measure this for us is to look at how many deals took place in the marketplace. Just on a going basis, so you see the light blue is the quarters for 2008, the dark blue is the quarters for 2009. You notice on the sales side, first quarter 2009, sharp drop. No coincidence, it's about 90 days after the fall of 2008 when everything froze. Direct impact to the selling market. Since then, the good news is transaction velocity has slowly increased. We've experienced a 30% increase in 2010 to 2009, which is, again, a good sign. Leasing has a similar story. Again, we're up about 30% in 2010 compared to 2009. I believe this is a good indicator. Cap rates. Ross Moore hit on this from the national level. This is just an overview of what's happening here locally. This is how we measure our investment sales. That would be any commercial property sold to a non-owner occupied buyer. 2005, 2006, 2007, you can see on average we were in what I'll call the 8s. You saw that it was climbing in 2008 and 2009 with an overall average in 2009 of about 10.5. The good news is we have dropped back down into 2010. Cap rates come down, pricing goes up. So that's a good indicator for our pricing. So the theory would be if, especially in retail and industrial, supply is relatively healthy, maybe even improving, demand's increasing from 09 to 010, the theory would be that pricing follows, in theory. And I would say, well, not so fast. This shows the industrial average pricing per square foot on a sales basis over the years. You can see that it's dropped from a high of over $45 per square foot in 07 to an average of about $27 per square foot now. That's a 60% drop. Yes, demand is increasing, but certainly not at a pace to bring the pricing along just yet. The bright spot in all of this is recent numbers are showing kind of a bottoming out. We believe we found the floor. Next year, hopefully we see that indicated in the numbers. Office values. Ross, I couldn't help but think when you showed us the leasing numbers for office on a national level, I saw some CBD leasing numbers at $40 per square foot. We'll sell you buildings for that number. Our average price per square foot in the office market, again, you can see a similar story. It peaked at $105 a foot or thereabouts, and now it's down to about $50 a square foot. Again, about a 50% drop. Retail, they hung on a little longer through 2008, but now you can see that they're dropping as well from a value from $100 to about $50 per square foot. That's not a necessarily pretty picture. I guess it depends on what side of the table you're sitting on when you're looking at a transaction. The indicator, the big influencer in our market is what we call the troubled assets factor. We'd categorize any property that's under some sort of financial duress as troubled. One way to look at this is to look at our local lenders. This is no offense to our local lenders. We love them, but the data that they produce replicates this market. If we go to the regional lenders, that data gets fogged a little bit by other markets. So we've selected local lenders, and we've identified those loans they identify as either being 90 days past due, in non-accrual status, or listed as owned real estate. And you can see third quarter 2010's most recent numbers we have, but you can see how that has been building. Yeah, some have done a little better. Some have seen some drops, but overall, it is still building. This does bring some new supply into the marketplace, but more importantly, it applies downward pricing pressure. An unfortunate reality with these assets is they often hit the market in disrepair and in some poor condition, which only enhances further price reductions and keeps that pricing pressure down. The troubled asset pipeline will continue to apply that pressure until either the pipeline here dries up or demand overpowers that. But this will be our headwind. This is just a brief summary. I'm going to pull the panel up here in a moment. But so the talking points for West Michigan in 2010 was we do believe that was a bottoming out year. I think we found the floor on pricing in most segments. I agree with Ross. I don't see it coming up anytime soon, but I think we found the floor. I think the downward spiral on values has stabilized. The recovery, well, for some segments, I would say immediately. We're very bullish on manufacturing, as Ross was as well, and we're seeing some indicators around that now. Some segments will recover immediately. Others, it's going to be a haul, and we've got a good 12 to 24 months. And again, that headwind for us is going to be what we call that troubled asset factor. Not necessarily bank-owned. There's a lot of assets that fall into that category for us that aren't necessarily bank-owned, but they are in some trouble. So all that results in 2011, 2012 being fantastic year of opportunities and possibilities. And it's all a matter of perspective, right? What side of the table are you sitting on? And for more on that, what I'd like to do is pull Dr. Singh and Ross and our panelists up to the podium at this time, and we're going to get in some questions and get their input. So gentlemen, if you could come on up, I'd appreciate it. Anywhere. So we've met Ross, we've met Harry, and I've got a few of my partners in crime here. Starting on the far side, Mike Murray. Mike specializes in retail properties. Colin Cray, who specializes in investment properties. John Kuiper, his specialization is industrial properties. Scott Morgan from the office segment. Many of the questions that I've got have been fed to us from you. I think in a lot of the RSVPs you saw an opportunity to feed us some questions, and we're just going to kind of get to it. Starting with, I need some detail. I just spoke high-level overview, and Ross alluded to earlier, there's pockets in every segment. So I guess the question would be, what's the rest of the story from your specialty, from your perspective? And Scott, I'll just start with you.
Okay. Well, I think that, we've talked a lot about, Ross has talked a lot about the lagging indicator of, job growth and what that means. And I think I just wanted to boil that down to what we've seen in West Michigan, and that is that, you could have a large tenant, relatively large tenant in our market that might be 20 or 25,000 square feet. And they may have borne the brunt of the recession maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where their employment or their payroll dropped, but they're buried in a 5-year lease, so they can't really take advantage of that downsize and payroll for another 2 or 3 years until that lease expires. So we're seeing, that's what we've continued to see for the last 2 or 3 years, and probably another year or so into it before we see those companies finally being able to right size. I mean, some are able to right size through subletting, but I think most of them have to wait until that lease term expires, and then they go ahead and shed that square footage, and that's why we've seen our vacancy rates come up. Now, what we really have been seeing, especially this year, is the optimism and enthusiasm and hiring of the smaller firms, and they're starting to sign longer term leases. I think, in our office, the last 12 months, we've seen 5, 7, 10-year leases, which was unheard of 2 or 3 years ago. But it takes a lot of those small users to make up for the downsizing of a 20,000-foot tenant.
Good. I'm going to jump to Colin.
Sure. Well, numbers are one thing, but I'm curious, amongst the audience, who's sitting here feels better than they did a year ago? Hands. Well, I mean, that's my judge for confidence. And frankly, we've seen it in the investment world, and that's why, Derek, you saw the cap rates go down, which means pricing's going up in the investment world. What's driving that is the increased demand. That's pure and simple what it is, combined with the fact that capital is a lot more available than it was just 6 months ago. Increasingly every day, I think we're seeing more opportunities with lenders that are willing to finance, that are looking at transaction volumes. Believe it or not, we're involved with some Michigan-based real estate that are still trading in the mid 7% cap rate range. Long-term leases, very strong tenants, but it's still out there. It still happens, and that's driving those cap rates down. So really the story from the investment perspective is increased demand means price goes back up.
And Ross mentioned on a national level, he saw some markets reporting a 200% increase on the investment sales activity. How does that compare to what you've seen?
Well, we saw a significant increase in 10 over 09. I don't know that we saw a 200% increase, but it's certainly, if the last 6 months of 2010 are any indicator, 2011 is going to be a big year of investment sales because it's increasing.
Good. Mike, from a retail perspective, what did I miss? What's the rest of the story?
Sure. Well, the exciting part of retail is our vacancy decreased throughout 2010, and I really liked Ross's example of the office markets in Boston, LA, et cetera, where you have these hot little pockets. In retail, we have our A properties that are very well positioned. They've got the visibility, they've got the parking, they're in a good synergy of other retailers on a good road, et cetera. Those vacancy rates are decreasing because the landlords had to reduce their rental rates to attract those tenants. They're seeing those tenants come. The scary part of retail, kind of behind all the numbers, are the B and C projects, the projects that are lacking one or more of those fundamentals. We're seeing for the first time ever, price isn't helping those properties fill up. You know, typically a landlord would just keep, or a property owner, a seller would reduce their price and eventually somebody would come along and bite. We're not seeing that right now with those other properties because the retailers understand the location and those fundamentals are more important than ever.
John, want to jump in industrial perspective?
Sure, thanks, Derek. Before I get into what I expect to see this coming year, I want to point out on your one slide where you showed the average dollar price per square foot sale pricing from 2005 all the way down to 2010. Yeah, if you're flipping back to it, I wrote a couple of notes down and had it up at close to $47 a square foot, dropping down to last year's numbers of approximately $27 a square foot. And I just want to point out that when we're looking at the average price per square foot from industrial sales, we take into account not only the fully leased industrial properties, but also the user sales and the troubled asset sales. If you go back to 2005 and 6, the bulk of the transactions were definitely on the investment side and the user side, very little troubled assets. Flip that around completely for last year, a lot more troubled assets, some good user transactions, and less, but still some investment transactions. So while that is a huge slide, there's multiple components to it. So for 2011, I think the industrial market really is, we're looking at two different stories, both from a sales side and a leasing side. On the sales side, overall we expect the prices to slowly increase. And when I say slowly, this is where the two stories come into play. On the manufacturing segment, as Dr. Singh pointed out, we're pretty optimistic. The trend lines are people are growing, they're manufacturing more, they're going to require more space. It may not tie completely back to the unemployment numbers, but things are definitely coming around. So those sale prices we expect to start to come back. However, the other side of the story is we continue to see, as you mentioned, Derek, the headwind. You've got these troubled assets that continue to drag the numbers down. So we're hedging. We believe the numbers are going to come up slightly, but pulled down by the troubled assets. If you flip back over to the leasing market, again, you've got some of the same story. The manufacturing, heavy industrial, well-infrastructured buildings will start to, you'll have a decrease in vacancy. Rates will probably hold, maybe come up a little bit in certain segments. And then the other side of that story is the warehouse distribution market. It's going to take longer to increase the demand for those spaces. Velocity will start to come up. It's still going to be shorter term deals, and the rates are going to be held fairly low. So it's going to take a little while when you start to put these manufacturing facilities back into play before they push out into the need for putting raw materials and finished goods off-site.
On industrial, we just showed that from a supply standpoint, industrial's been the tightest supply or lowest vacancy kind of on average over the years. So the theory would be that if vacancy there is healthy, so to speak, that's the segment where we're going to see new construction. Is that proving to be true or false?
Absolutely true. And when I look at, I might take the word new out and just say we're going to see construction. What I mean by that is I don't expect to see a lot of new industrial buildings all over the market popping out of the ground. I just don't anticipate that. However, modifications, renovations, changes to existing facilities, that you will definitely see. Construction from a warehouse distribution standpoint, as I just mentioned, we don't foresee any construction in that segment of the market for quite some time. It's, you know, there's just overcapacity, too much supply, not enough demand. I would say that there's a realistic example of that construction happening right now. There is a tenant that signed a long-term lease. They found a building that was perfect for them, about 200,000 square feet, heavy infrastructure, good location, heavy parking. Problem was the ceiling height was only 16 foot clear. They needed a taller ceiling. When they compared it to new construction, what they discovered is it was more cost effective to modify and put that building back into play. they're raising the roof on 200,000 square feet of a building from 16-foot clear to 32-foot clear, something we've never seen in this market. And that's a great, I think that's more of the type of construction we're going to see in the manufacturing and industrial market in this coming year.
One more question on the industrial. So this says the GM plant is going dark. The Steelcase just announced another plant shutdown. What are we going to do with all the dark manufacturing facilities?
You know, we really have, to some degree, it's same as usual. We have three options. We can lease it and sell it, or from a statistic standpoint, what I prefer is just tear it down, remove it from the inventory. It helps the overall supply side. It's largely anticipated with this week's news. Lormax Stearns is moving forward on that project, and it's anticipated that that entire facility will be demolished. Sounds a little crazy, but in reality, you know, a facility like that, it's very difficult for it to meet today's market and its requirements in today's manufacturing segment. It's an older facility. On the other hand, it's extremely well located, has heavy infrastructure, and would be a great site for new construction. And so, you know, to answer that one specifically, you know, that will not impact our stats. On the other hand, you've got the announcement also recently with the Steelcase facility or facilities that may come on the market within this next year. That's a little bit more challenging. You know, we don't expect to see those demolished. They can be reused, but you have to figure out how to get them to meet the market. Most of the facilities are extremely well built and have good infrastructure, whether it's that, you know, the campus that they're selling some buildings on now or the past campus. As a side note, what do you do with them? You know, the campus that was sold 3 years ago, about 4 million square feet, almost 2.5 million square feet of that has been either released or resold, and there are companies back in there. Not necessarily bringing the jobs that we had at that campus at one point in time, but definitely increasing the activity. So we've got to get the facilities to meet the market. They've got to be well located, heavy infrastructure, really to move quicker than the rest of the supply.
Thank you. Scott, from an office perspective, a couple years ago, kind of the shining star was medical office. What's the latest there?
Medical is still a great area. The demand has remained high, you know, throughout the last 3 or 4 years, and I think we've all seen a tremendous explosion of medical up on the Hill and down in the St. Mary's area. So that's just continued to be the darling. The medical tenants, you know, they are very unwilling usually to move around because they have clients that come to a particular location. They have just huge investment in their spaces. Upwards of $100 a square foot, sometimes $150, sometimes $200. It can be just a massive investment. And they usually sign, or pretty much always sign long-term leases. So you're looking at 10-year leases. They're not rolling over frequently, so there's the huge inertia for them to downsize or to move. And frankly, I think a lot of them, although they've been a little bit worried about what's going to happen with insurance reform and healthcare and their reimbursements overall, they tend to be, you know, conservative but optimistic. And I think it's that medical is poised for a big growth in West Michigan.
Thank you. Dr. Singh, yes. You touched on a couple headwinds, and we didn't hear much, and I think Ross maybe hit on this a touch, but what headwinds do you see, and maybe specifically oil? It's getting a lot of press lately. Where do you see that impacting, or maybe how? And Ross, feel free to jump in as well.
Well, there are a couple of headwinds. We've talked a lot about commercial real estate. Residential real estate is another story. That's where the whole trouble began. And that's where the whole trouble will end in terms of ultimately the national economy healing. You know, ultimately this whole foreclosures are going to spike up, and it's going to take some time to clear the kind of troubled assets. Speaking of troubled assets, the biggest ones are in residential. So that's a huge headwind in terms of trying to recover on a stronger basis. The price of oil might relatively go up, but I don't see that as a very significant factor. The other headwind in terms of the national economy and also the regional economy is this whole idea that the states are going to be cutting their expenditures quite significantly. From an economic point of view, it doesn't make sense to have a state trying to cut their expenditure at a time when their revenue is falling. So you dig yourself into a deeper hole. You know, your revenue falls, you cut your expenditure, your revenue falls somehow, you cut your expenditure somehow. So I like balanced budgets, but balanced budgets are much better on a dynamic basis over the business cycle, where you save a lot during good times, and then you spend a lot during bad times. Unfortunately, the states have not had a very good rainy day fund. The rainy day fund dries up very quickly. So, that's going to be a significant headwind in terms of fiscal and state policies dragging down in terms of government expenditure. So the mortgage crisis, the higher price of oil, the fiscal policy not being expansionary, and at some point further down the road, the Federal Reserve, once it finds out that the economy has stabilized and is growing significantly, they're going to start ticking interest rates up there too. So, but that's not coming this year, I think.
Any commentary there?
Well, just on oil, I'm smiling because, you know, $92, it doesn't seem so bad because we were at 147. But, you know, 10 years ago, if you said $92, most people would have fallen off their chair. And I am not an oil expert, but when I do listen to the oil experts now, they say we don't need to get worried until we hit 100. And even at 100, we're okay. It's more like 110. Where they're getting that number from, I have no idea. But supposedly we have nothing to worry about until we get to 110. Having said that, I think what's more important is the price of gas. And I know that oil goes into many things, more than just gas. But the problem is we all drive around, and guess what? We see the price of gas. And you know, $4 a gallon, gulp, $4.50 a gallon. You know, Europe's at $8. But my point is that it has a psychological effect. And I think it really does. And if you go back and look at the consumer confidence, you can actually see the consumer confidence move depending on the price of gas. So that's where I get concerned, is people start going, have you seen the price of gas? I'm not going to have that vacation, or I'm not going to buy whatever.
Let me say something provocative here. I would like the price of gas to go up around to about $6 per gallon. Economists have a very good idea about what to do about this.
Not running for office.
What you need for gas, you know, my wife bought a Honda Pilot. And I said, you know, why don't you buy something like a hybrid or something? You know, I call that driving Osama bin Laden kind of scenario. But anyway, this whole idea, what economists say is that we need the price of gas to be significantly higher, but give the rebate back in terms of just giving it back to them. But the relative price of gas needs to go up compared to everything else, because we need to change our driving behavior. We need to rely much more on public transportation. It's a good idea to put like a $2, $3 tax on gas, and at the end of the year, give it back to the Americans. So in terms of revenue, it'll be completely neutral. The price, you know, your income will not change, but the relative price of gas will go up compared to everything else you're buying, and you'll buy less gas, and that's what we need to do.
I'm gonna stick to bricks and mortar. That's just my.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's a strange concept, but most economists agree that it'll be revenue neutral, because you give the money back. You know, you're not taking the tax. You're just changing the relative price of gas to everything else.
I'm gonna shift gears. Colin, Ross said, you said, investment activity is increasing. What does today's investor look for, and maybe more importantly, what do they look like?
What are they looking for? One of the guys in our office coined a phrase, trophies and train wrecks. You saw that in your forecast book. And really it talks about the two extremes of the marketplace. Trophies being those great located properties, long-term lease, strong tenants. When we're coming out of what we just came out of, security seems awfully good in a portfolio. So investors have been looking for those, and frankly, those are the deals that are easiest to finance in this marketplace, where lenders are finally just coming back to the table. You're going to finance the strongest deals. So when you saw that cap rate number going down, and again, prices going up on average, it's because those trophies are starting to trade. That's what investors are looking for. The train wreck scenario, you saw I'll still call it a tsunami of troubled assets. Investors are willing to take risk, but they want to get incredible value for the risk that they're taking. So they want to buy this distressed stuff. I see a bunch of bankers and workout people in the audience. They want to buy this stuff, but they want to buy it cents on the dollar. We see offers who are the investors? We still see offers from people all over the country looking at Michigan. In fact, there's a bunch of investors I've spoken with recently that said, we're only looking in Michigan because we think you guys have taken it on the chin and we think there's incredible value there. And it's true. Talk about 4 cap rates, 5 cap rates, that's ridiculous. Compared to this, I saw 13 cap rate and 14 cap rate deals last year. So is there more risk to go to that 13, 14 cap rate? Yeah, maybe. Do we have as high a growth here in Michigan? Maybe not. But that's a pretty great return, particularly when you look at the financing market. One more thing is there were a lot of contractors who got their buddies together and bought deals and purchased real estate in West Michigan as far as the local people are concerned. We're seeing that paradigm shift to a new investor coming into the marketplace. We're seeing new people that haven't thought about real estate that are looking at it and saying, when's the time to buy? Buy on the floor. Most people saw the values dropped 30% in some cases. Now's the time to buy. Capital's available. It's a new investor. Groups of people are putting their funds together and getting into the real estate world that haven't been there before.
And how are they being financed?
Well, the picture gets better as we go week by week here, but there's a lot of local lenders that are still doing deals. They're looking for quality deals. Loan to values are higher than they were, which is probably a good thing. Your amortization schedule, you can't push it to 30 years anymore. Every once in a while we get investors that were doing that and getting that. Now you're better off at 20. So local lenders are still doing deals. Life insurance companies. You saw the slide. Their delinquencies are so low that they continue to bring more money to the forefront. And the CMBS market. CMBS market has been doing deals in Michigan, less than they used to. But all of those, along with capital, private capital, what drives those troubled assets? It's cash deals. We got to get it done. It's a distressed asset. It's cash. So those are the sources of equity for deals.
Thank you, Colin. I'm going to switch to retail. Mike, last year you mentioned that you expected to see this flight to quality amongst tenants. You cited the Best Buy move up on Alpine as an example of that. Has that trend truly materialized?
It did not come to life as much as we thought it would, and we think that had a lot to do with the landlords that did have some money, didn't want to spend it. A lot of landlords, quite frankly, did not have the money to entice the tenants through TIs and build-outs, et cetera. And the retailers themselves, the tenants, were very gun-shy to relocate. We saw a few relocations around town, but we do see that picking up as the consumer confidence increases, et cetera. The Michael's Arts and Crafts store on Alpine, they're about to relocate across the street, and they're going to go in line with Target and Best Buy. They're going to save money in rent. The landlord's doing a complete turnkey build out for them to entice them over there because that helps with the synergy of that center. I believe in 11, we're going to see more of that just because money has freed up a little bit to make those transactions more easy as well.
So thank you. We got an interesting one that came in specifically towards retail, maybe somewhat towards investment. But then under this scenario, it says, I purchased a strip mall in 2007 with 3 friends. It cash flowed for 4 months. And since then, we've lost half the tenants. We've struggled to keep the project afloat. And now we realize that the site really does lack the exposure and access that others offer. Our debt balloons in 1 year. What do we do? I know we chuckle, but I think this is a real common occurrence, which for some is not so funny. So what do we do?
Well, it's funny, he's not funny, but I mean, he's referring to his partners as friends still, so that's a good thing because I mean, it's tough. I mean, you get your buddies together, you go buy something, and as soon as the pieces of the puzzle start coming apart, fingers start pointing, and you got to raise capital, and not all your friends have the money to put in, so it gets ugly, and I feel bad for you. It is tough, and this is happening to a lot of people right now. If you're missing one of the true retail fundamentals, which I'm sure you've discovered by now, you have to assume you've got 12 months to 2 years as is, no other tenants coming along. Then it's looking internally at your own financial situation, your partners, meeting with the bank, and laying your cards on the table and being like, here's where we're at, what do we do? The bank doesn't want the property back. They would love to work with you to try to turn the ship around. But nothing's going to happen overnight. You got a few years ahead of you of before you get that income back to where it was when you purchased it. So you got to be true to yourself, true to your partners, and true to the bank.
Thank you. I think that's a real life example. I'm sure there's more than one. So, Ross, from what you've seen, welcome to Grand Rapids. This has been brief. Got in last night, but from what you've seen and observed, how would you say that we stack up compared to your travels elsewhere?
You know, you're clearly not a tier 1 market, and that's where I spend most of my time. You know, I go to Chicago, I go to New York, I go to San Francisco, Washington. You know, that's where all the attention is, I think. And then I do spend a lot of time in Texas and some of the Sun Belt cities, and you're not getting that migration that those areas are getting. You're kind of stuck in the middle. But and I'll go back to what I said about manufacturing. I am absolutely convinced that 5 years from now, we're going to look back and we're going to go, wow. You know, who would have thought we could become a manufacturing nation again? And you know, it's getting a lot more expensive to outsource, to manufacture in China, in India. I mean, already, you know, people in China are saying go to Vietnam. And with the exchange rate, you know, I'm hearing stories, you know, we have offices in India, and they keep on telling me this. I don't believe them, but they say, Ross, you'll now pay more for land in India than you will almost anywhere in the US. I mean, I find that just mind-boggling, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's getting more expensive to manufacture elsewhere, and in the US is incredibly efficient. The dollar is just icing on the cake. It's very, very efficient. So I hang my hat on manufacturing, and I think there's a surprise here that's nothing but good. And
that has a huge impact on us. We're a manufacturing town. So
yeah. I mean, I go to places now that they're saying, Ross, we're now putting on 2nd and 3rd shifts. Now the sales are all global. They're not selling to Texas or selling to the Carolinas. They're selling to Latin America. They're selling to Europe. They're selling to Asia Pacific. That's where the demand is. So I say that's your future. And you're certainly not putting out the worst numbers in the country, not by a long shot.
Good. Dr. Singh.
Yes.
Last year we talked about the risk for a double dip. There's a lot of discussion around that. And you know, this year we certainly have some headwinds. What are the odds?
Well, the odds right now for a double dip recession is pretty low. Last summer, when we hit a soft patch, there was significant concern about a double dip recession. But now all the numbers are so positive in terms of different sectors of the economy. And like Ross is saying about manufacturing, you know, we are on the cutting edge in terms of manufacturing expanding again. So if you look, we're all forecasting, right? And forecasting is all subject to caveats. We don't know where the next shock is going to come from. We're just taking the numbers and we're just extrapolating. So based on that kind of extrapolation, the chances of double dip is pretty low. Now, double dip might happen if there's an unexpected significant shock from somewhere, right? A significant shock could be something like countries in Europe defaulting, 2 or 3, like dominoes, right? 2 or 3 states defaulting because our states are in bad, budget distress. It could be the price of oil going up very significantly, somewhere around, 130, 140, although it's unlikely. Or it could be, and that's the part I was talking about before, it could be that gorilla growling really starts growling. People start questioning our solvency because we don't rein in the budget deficits, which right now, in terms of the federal budget deficits, are like $1 trillion a year. That kind of stuff, I don't see that coming very quickly. We have a long way to go in terms of that, but that is the ultimate kind of wild card in terms of what could really throw a monkey wrench into our whole scenario of increasing prosperity.
Thank you. I'm gonna wrap up with a final question to just send right down the line to all of you. And so 1 year from now, we're sitting here looking back. What's the headline from your perspective? What's the headline on 2011? And I'll just start with Harry. We go right down the line if that's okay.
The headline would be that the West Michigan economy has recovered significantly, probably captured about 30% of the loss we had of the Great Recession, so that within about 3 years or so, we'll be back to the pre-2007 levels.
I will say we'll be talking mostly about the Fed and how they're going to engineer a slowdown. How they are going to back out of a 3-year period of incredible stimulus without, upsetting things.
I agree with that. For the national level, this whole issue about how they unwind their balance sheet is going to be a major preoccupation.
Interesting. Scott.
I think for the downtown office market, which is probably the darling of the office market today, the headline's going to be, downtown survives the Bridgewater foreclosure. And what was the impact of that? Bridgewater is 22% of the Class A downtown office market. It could go, two directions. I'm not sure which, but it could be on a negative side. Is that a developer or somebody buys it for cents on the dollar? And with a recapitalized project, they're armed with basically a war chest that they can then drive rents down around the rest of the downtown market and compete for Class A tenants. Hopefully that doesn't happen. The other thing could happen is that a large corporate user or a single tenant user could come in and swoop down, and because of the very attractive purchase price, take that whole thing right off the market, and then grab, as they're trying to grab extra space, perhaps the other tenants in the building spill out and infiltrate into downtown, and we see the downtown vacancy plummet and rental rates really drive up. So I think that'll be a very interesting thing to see how that plays out next year.
How about industrial?
If I, 1 year from now, if I look back, my questions, my headline would be, did you miss the window? And what I mean by that is Dr. Singh's data, manufacturing definitely is coming back around. Whether you're, if you're an operator and you need to secure space, whether it's a purchase or a lease, by this time next year, you're going to be looking back and questioning whether you missed the window. What that means at the end of the day is that there are going to be more transactions, there is more optimism, our vacancy will drop, and things, the manufacturing segment, to some degree what got us into this mess on the heels of the housing market, is also going to pull us back out of this mess.
Thank you. Colin.
2011, the year of incredible opportunities for buyers of investment real estate. When do you want to buy? You want to buy at the bottom. I think we're at the bottom. In fact, we've seen some price increases already. The fundamentals, while they're weak, buy based on the current fundamentals, buy 30%, 20% below where we were. Capital's available, rates are low, lock in for the long term. And there's going to be some great opportunities. They're tricky to find. They're not around every corner. You got to really do your investigation about the fundamentals of that site. But there's some incredible opportunities there for buyers. We can buy so far below replacement costs right now. And with cash flow in place, stable cash flow, it's a great time to be a buyer of investment real estate.
In 2011, PF Chang's is going to open, so I can quit answering that question every time somebody asks me. But really, we're going to see a steep increase in our transaction volume. We're going to do more deals in the marketplace. Retailers are going to take advantage of the reduced prices out there and be able to position themselves in more of these A type of settings that they haven't been able to afford in years past. We're also, like I said before, the B and C properties are going to continue to lag behind the rest of the quality retail product out there.
Thank you. I've got just a couple closing comments to make clarifying points. One, questions were submitted from you. We didn't get to them all, and I'm sure that this probably prompted others. We do have question cards available at that registration desk. If you've got questions, you're probably not alone. And what I would ask is share that question with us, and we'll be sure to get back to you. We might even do so with all of you, because we have email addresses. So we want to follow up on all unanswered questions. And also, we do want to make sure we have your email address. The forecast materials, all of our data, it will be emailed out later today. And so let's make sure we've got your information for that. If we don't, if you didn't for some reason RSVP through the email system, Let's make sure we've got at least your card at that registration table. That'll help. And on all things, we want your feedback. How can we make this event better? What information would you like to see covered in the future so that we can keep providing some value for you? I came across a quote that I thought was maybe a good one just to close on. This is I'll paraphrase, but this is Chris Lee. You've probably heard of him. He's a consultant from California. He doesn't know Grand Rapids, and he's speaking to the real estate industry and what's going to pull us through. And I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he said, the cornerstone of the real estate industry's future rests with entrepreneurs who shape our future. Entrepreneurs with these qualities: self-confidence in their visions, ideas, solutions, and decisions. Unabashed lack of fear teamed with a willingness to take some risk. They're perceptive and creative enough to recognize and leverage opportunity in advance of others, and a capacity to get up when unforeseen events knock them down. I read this and I thought, this guy doesn't know us, but he just described us, West Michigan. And I'm very encouraged by everything we're seeing, and we are not the tier one, we're kind of the sleeper, which I love. We're positioned really well on a lot of fronts, and I'm very optimistic about next year with some headwinds, but proud to be a part of it with you, and I look forward to getting into the next year with you, and I look forward to seeing you all again next year. So with that, thank you.